Hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan. It's Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, which means we're here in the Epiphan studio today. So happy to have you guys with us. And we've got someone, well, I was going to say someone new, but really you've been on the show before.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
It's been a long while,
it's
but
good.
yeah, I've been here once or twice.
Good to have you back. So David
Thanks.
Kirk is VP Marketing here at Epiphan. He also knows a ton about our products, a lot about AV Sync, which is our topic for today. So Dave, I know we're going to get into the topic in full in a bit, but can you give us a little bit of a brief on what we're talking about today?
Yeah, today we're really just going to take a look at issues that you may have with AV Sync. It's always an issue when, people are speaking and that audio is just a little bit out and that lip sync is so annoying to watch. We're going to take a look at how that gets introduced into your signal chain, so whether you're going through digital switchers or coming out of cameras directly, and how you can correct for it, measure it, figure out how much you've got, and then how to get rid of it. So we've had to do that in our studio here. We did a lot of measurements, so we got some cool data to share with you guys and show you what we measured and how we corrected for our own studio application. And then we're going to talk a little bit about other scenarios that might be problematic when you're trying to line up your AV sync and get everything looking good.
So very useful topic today, certainly for the live streaming audience we have. So stay tuned for more on that. But first, wanted to cover some news. So coming up the first week of April, NAB, one of the biggest shows of the year. I know I'm excited. You must be excited.
It's going to be a good show. Yeah, NAB is always a lot of fun. It's huge. It's busy, and every year, the streaming aspect of NAB gets bigger and bigger. And 2 years ago it was pretty small. Last year it was quite big, and this year I think it's really going to come into its own. So we're really looking forward to NAB. I think it's going to be a great show.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. It'll be my first NAB. Really looking forward to it. So we'll be there at booth C11143. You can come find us. And come say hello. Stop by.
Absolutely.
Happy to chat and meet with all of you. We also have some, of course, our products, and I know a lot of people are interested to check out our upcoming Pearl Mini, so great place to come and see what's happening with Pearl Mini at NAB. Also, just wanted to promote the forum a little bit today. So I've got it up here, Lisa, if we want to just show, but the Epiphan Community Forum, epiphan.com/forum. There has been a lot of activity on the forum recently. Lots of great questions, lots of great interaction happening. Advice, best practices. There's all kinds of little tech support tidbits you can pick up. So make sure to check out the forum if you haven't. I gotta say, I've used a lot of different forums across the web, and this Epiphan forum is so clean, so easy to use. It's one of the quickest forums I've ever signed up for. So there's really no reason not to be on the forum if you're at all interested in live streaming, video production, cameras, etc.
Yeah, it's broken down nicely into different products or different issues. So, whether you've got questions about a specific product and you want other users to help you out or Epiphan folks to help you out, it's very easy to dive in and see what's already been there. There's been a lot of contributions, especially in the last couple of months. Things have really picked up in the forum. So lots of information in there, lots of people in sharing their tips and tricks. So it's been great.
Just wanted to show very quickly here in Webcaster, we've got the camera thread on Webcaster. Lots of people testing different cameras. If you go all the way to the bottom, I've uploaded a Google spreadsheet here, and this is cool because it's a list of all the most popular cameras that a lot of our customers and us here at Epiphan have tested. A ton of useful information here. Everything you need to know about whether a camera has XLR input or 3.5.
Or clean output on HDMI, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So if you want to learn about lots, or even just have a good reference list of cameras in front of you, check out that thread in the Webcaster section of the forum. Of course, as this is a live show, we are monitoring chat, so don't be shy. Say hello on YouTube or Facebook. We're going to be answering any questions you may have. And with that, let's dive right into the main topic. So, AV Sync. What is AV Sync, Dave?
So AV Sync, as we talked about, what most people associate it with is that lip sync issue, right? So literally it is how well synchronized is your audio to your video, or in the case where you have multiple video inputs, multiple camera angles, how closely are those synced together? And products like Pearl take in multiple cameras, audio from different sources, whether it's digital audio embedded or whether it's coming in on analog. And all of that stuff will have slightly different delay coming from the source they have. And you want to correct for that. You want to make sure that when you're recording it, when you're streaming it live, all of that's been synced up nice and tight so that things look correct and people aren't kind of looking at your program going, there's something seems a little off. When you have a little bit of sync issue, things just look a little funny. When you have a lot, it's really distracting, and it's very hard to watch a program that's got a lot of AV sync issues. And you see it, it's almost like watching something that's been dubbed into a second language when it gets really bad. It's
like uncomfortable to watch.
It is, and it's very distracting. It's hard to, get people to focus on the content of what you've got if they're noticing these technical details. So today we really wanted to talk about where are those issues, where do they come from, and then how can you measure how much AV sync you need to correct for. So how badly are those sources synchronized before you start? And then how good do they need to be before people stop noticing that there's a problem?
Right.
All right. So that's really, when we set out to build this episode, that was really what we wanted to answer was how do we detect this stuff? How do we measure it? And then how do we correct it? You'll never get it perfect, but how good does it need to be before it stops being a problem?
Okay.
And that's really the threshold that we were looking for.
So we've not been without our struggles here, even on this show. Some of our early
Everybody
episodes.
has them. Yeah.
We had some minor sync issues, which I hope we've corrected now. Let us know if you think we're out of sync at all. We can adjust on the fly. But there was an episode that I just wanted to share. This is from back in October, and we had a guest on the show talking about digital production trends. And I just wanted to play a little bit of this clip because we had our guest coming in over Skype, and the lip sync was quite off, so I'll just play a little bit of it.
Is seeing it where it goes for, outdoor advertising on billboards, that sort of thing. If you think about, if we're at a
now you see when I'm talking in this clip, my audio is in
clean.
sync. It's nice, but for whatever reason, the way that we brought our guest in on the program, there was a little bit of, I think the audio was actually quite a bit early.
Early, yes.
Yeah.
And that early is typical in most of the setups where you have AV sync issues. Normally the audio is early and the video is coming a little later. Well, it turns out that audio paths, especially analog audio paths, so a lot of people are going directly from a microphone, maybe through something like a mixer, and then directly into an analog audio port. And that stuff is typically extremely low latency, and it's engineered to be low latency for things like concerts or things where you're watching live and you're hearing in the room. That needs to be immediate. It needs to be synced, and all of that gear does that very well. And when that's processed in the analog domain, there's very, very little delay. We took one of our mixers, so we have a little 4-channel mixer that we use in one of our other little studios, and we measured the delay there, and it's less than 1 millisecond. It's in the tens of microseconds.
So that's, right? You're never going to notice.
You're never going to see that, right? And that's great. So you can wind your stuff through multiple channels of that mixer and do all that, and you're not going to have an issue. No one's going to notice that amount of delay. But that audio path, especially the analog audio path, tends to be very fast. On the other side, you've got the digital video path, which tends to introduce delays, and a lot of it is because equipment will tend to receive a whole frame, process that frame, and then send that frame out. So in the process of going through a switcher or going through like a matrix, a lot of times there are multiple frame delays as you go through, and depending on, again, your frame rate that you're actually transmitting, whether it's 60 frames per second or 30, that'll introduce a different amount of absolute time. Mm-hmm. But each of those sort of paths, signal paths, is introducing a little bit of delay. And we even found in our tests here that the camera itself, so even coming directly from the camera on the HDMI, there's already a few frames of delay coming out of the camera. So right out of the bat, you're starting with hundreds of milliseconds of delay, and that's obvious when you record it just straight like that, uncorrected. And so the camera is a source, and then other elements also add to that.
So we'll share some of the results for these tests in just a moment, but I just wanted to show a little bit of a diagram here that we created to sort of help people visualize. So we've got here, this is actually the setup here in this studio. Yep. And you can see we've got the analog audio path here on the left. Microphone, there's virtually no latency on a microphone, right? No. Then we go through a mixer. Now, I hadn't seen the results of our test yet when this diagram was created, so I put in 10, I guessed 10 milliseconds, but you're saying it was even less than that when we tested it.
Yeah, it's about 100 times less than that.
Wow.
So it's in the tens of microseconds range. when we measured our mixer, and they're all going to be very similar because those things are all analog, and they're engineered to be very low latency. So,
and then you see here on the right, we've got the C100 video path, and we actually measured, surprisingly, with our C100 that audio or video was actually late, significantly late, coming right out of the C100.
That's right. And I know other cameras. I know when Photo Joseph was highlighting this feature on Pearl, he did a video. I believe he was using a G5. It was a Panasonic for sure. I think it was the G5. Might have been a G4, but he was getting about 3 or 4 frames of delay of HDMI directly out of the camera as well.
Wow.
So it's pretty common. We measured a couple different cameras, and they all had some delay, whether it was our GoPro. We also did Alpha 6300, a Sony camera, and we did our C100. They all had differing amounts, but they all had delay directly on that HDMI output. So right out of the bat, as soon as you're starting to get your production together, that first signal coming right out of the camera is already out of sync with your live audio in your studio.
I gotta say, I was extremely surprised, and I didn't really want to believe the results out of the C100 at first. In fact, we even did a test where, rather than routing into Pearl 2, our production streaming and mixing device, we actually recorded a clip directly onto the SD card inside the C100.
We did.
And video was late on the internal recording as well.
It was. And that surprised me. I thought maybe you'd see that on a GoPro or on a 6300, that kind of classic camera. I thought the C100 would perform quite a bit better in terms of synchronization. But that's what we measured. So we got about 125 milliseconds of delay, and that's approaching, once you're above 100, certainly at 150, it's noticeable. People can see that there's a lip sync issue once you get into that range. And without running that signal further through a switcher or something else, you're already at the point where it's noticeable. So you do need to be cognizant of that and correct it if you can before you start recording.
Now, how can we translate, if let's say you're doing a recording, how can we translate milliseconds into frames if you're going to try to fix a problem?
So if you're at 60 frames per second, then every frame is 16.6 milliseconds. So every time that frame is getting processed, and let's say we have a 4-frame delay coming out of the camera, then you're looking at 65, 70 milliseconds of delay. If you're at 30 frames per second, it's double that. So a 4-frame delay, each frame is 33 milliseconds, and then when you have a 4-frame delay, now all of a sudden you're up to 130 some milliseconds. So with cameras that have multi-frame delay coming out, which is most of the ones, all the ones we tested had at least 2 frames coming out, some as much as 4. You're already, if you're at 30 frames per second, you're already above 100 milliseconds. You're approaching 130, 140. So
3 frames a second, pretty significant when you think about it, right?
It is.
That's to me, that would be noticeable. I think probably to the untrained eye, maybe a little less noticeable. But you were saying that when audio is early, it tends to be maybe more noticeable than if audio is late?
I think so. It tends to be, perception-wise, people, if it's a little bit late, you can get away with it a little bit more than when it's early. When it's early, the brain is very good at picking up and saying, that is quite unnatural. Normally when I see something and the audio is a tad late, I'm used to that. I get reflections off of the wall of audio and other things. So your brain is kind of used to dealing with that a little bit, as long as it's not extreme. But when it's early, that really throws us off. So having that early, and unfortunately, in a typical setup where you've got a digital camera with delay on the video and an analog signal path for your audio, that's what it is. It's early, right?
Yeah.
That audio is very early. And so you really want to correct that, and maybe to the point of even overcorrecting a little bit if you're not sure, right?
Okay.
If you're saying, maybe it's 150, maybe it's 120, go 150, and maybe it'll be a little bit delayed with respect to the video, but that's much better than being in advance. So
Makes sense.
You really want to correct it as much as you can, and maybe even a little past 0.
Okay, so I think you've done a great job of explaining AV sync, analog and digital audio paths. So people want to know, how can they test their audio sync? What is the methodology?
Yeah, so the easiest way and the simplest way to do it is to get a signal pattern generator, something that emits a video signal that's recognizable at the same time as an audio signal. So that audio signal needs to be intermittent, so a pulse or something coming once in a while that corresponds to something happening in the video. And there's lots of these kind of standard videos you can get that will generate a pulse or go from black to white on the screen when the pulse is emitted. And really what you're trying to do is then record that at the end of your signal chain. So where you're going to actually be streaming from or recording from. You want to take the signals at that point, and you want to measure. Once you've got that pattern coming in, you want to record that and then look at it and examine and say, does the audio peak at exactly the same time that that video changes from black to white or goes by a certain pattern? If it doesn't, then you know you're out of sync. And then most of them will tell you how far you are out of sync. So the ones that just go black and white, it's a little harder to tell. But I see you've got one up there on the screen. We
Yeah,
can show
actually,
where.
just found this on YouTube. This is a signal, little test signal. I'll just play a little bit of it.
Yep.
So you see, it's pretty simple. It just beeps when it hits 0, and then what you can do is point your camera at this test pattern, and then what you would do is you'd pause it when you hear you bring your file into editing software, and if you're hearing the beep and it's showing, for instance, here audio is early by 83 milliseconds, then you have some indication.
Correct.
Now, this signal pattern I found is okay, but the problem I had with it was that it's only 30 frames per second, so it's hard to measure.
Yeah, it's not very granular.
Yeah.
So you could definitely get one that's running faster to get a little bit better idea of exactly where that is. But even this is really good to say, okay, am I 150 or am I 80?
Yeah.
Right? Even there, if I was out by 80 and I pull that in a little bit, it's going to look a lot better. If I was at 150 and I only pulled it into 80, it's still going to look better. And once you get down into 50 milliseconds and below, no one's going to notice.
Right.
Certainly you need to be around 100 or even more before people start to really say, there's a sync problem there. So you don't need something super granular. As Dan said, just point your camera at one of these patterns, record it, and then play it back and analyze, does the audio come at exactly the right time?
I've actually got the test that we used right
great.
here. So we did some different recordings. This I think was with the C100, and you see we just shot. I just pulled the clip into Premiere, and then you see it plays. So this is the recording. Now if I bring my my play bar right onto the beep, you can see it in the waveform at the bottom.
Yep.
When I put my playhead right on the beep, you see on the video that audio is early by about 83 milliseconds in this test.
Exactly.
So what I think I'm going to do, actually, I've been working on an Epiphan test pattern that we will share with all of you. It's not quite ready yet, but by the time you see this video, it might be. So check in the video description down below, and we'll provide a link for that if you want to have a nice signal generator test that you can use.
Yep. So it was very simple to set up in our studio. We just literally used Dan's laptop. We put it here, pointed the camera at it. We have our microphone that's just out of frame right here that was picking up that beeping tone. And that's all we needed. Then we have everything connected through Pearl, of course. That's what we use to produce this show. So we just hit the record button on Pearl, pulled that file out, and take a look. And we could see, you could see live approximately what it was, and we can make a course adjustment right there. But if you pull it into editing software, then you're going to see a little bit more granular and be able to tell, yes, it's exactly 83. Otherwise, you might be going, is it 83? Is it 120? I'm not sure. It's hard to tell when that thing's whipping around and just beeping. But if you pull it into the software, it becomes very obvious.
Well, if you look at the old days of film, it was the clapperboard.
Exactly.
And I think that's still done with non-synchronous recording.
Absolutely.
On film sets today. But the only thing is, with a clapperboard, it's easy in editing to line up your clap with the audio, but if you don't know how much you're off, you can't correct for it.
That's right. And the clapper works great when it's in post-production, right? When you're live, you need to set all that stuff up pretty quickly. And
in advance.
And a clapper would work, right? Whether you're using a clapper or it's a beep tone coming from your laptop, any of those things where there's a visual signal that corresponds with a very abrupt audio signal, that's all you need to be able to judge how far out those two signals are. So it's pretty easy to get in and correct it. And as we mentioned, you don't have to get it perfect. You just need to get it good enough. And good enough is probably, if you're within 50 milliseconds, that's great. If you're less than 100, it's pretty good.
So we've discussed why sync problems happen. We've discussed how to test for it.
Yep.
So how do you actually fix these problems? What is the best way to correct for sync issues?
Right. So there are a few things you can do. There are individual analog audio boxes you can buy that will introduce delay, and they're for this exact reason. Because in a lot of large auditoriums, you'll have cameras going through large switchers that'll eventually make it up to the recording box, and that video will always be late relative to your analog audio. So they do have analog audio boxes where you can dial in a bunch of delay so that you run that before your mixer or between your mixer and your recorder, and you correct for that and slow the audio down to wait for the video to arrive. So that's one way to do it. What we've done in a product like Pearl is to kind of build that function right into the box so that you don't need an external device. You can plug that analog audio signal directly into the back of Pearl, bring your video in, knowing that your video is going to be a little late relative to that audio. And then we have a section in the web UI you can go to for the audio and select an amount of delay. And so we can either advance the audio, which in effect we're delaying the video, or you can delay the audio. And as we said, most times you need to delay the audio because it's arriving early.
It's arriving too early. So I've actually got the admin panel open here for our Pearl 2, and you can see the waveform moving a little bit as I talk. But so this is our analog XLR audio source. And you can see we've added a little bit of input gain, and we've also added 100 milliseconds of delay.
Yep.
And that's because we're using our A6300 today, which we measured at about 83 milliseconds early.
Exactly.
So we added about 100 milliseconds of delay, and hopefully it's looking in sync.
It should be in sync. You know, we do switch cameras in this studio a fair amount. Sometimes we're using the C100, sometimes it's the 6300. And because we've measured these, it's very quick for us just to be able to go in, tweak that number, and off we go. It's also fairly easy to do it on a live set if you bring along a laptop that's got one of those patterns. You can easily just put it at your camera, make sure your mic's close enough, do a quick test, and be able to get at least a ballpark that gets you in the range where you can get rid of the problem down to the point where people won't notice anymore. So when we have our A6300, we've got it set at 100 milliseconds in Pearl. I know our C100, surprisingly, is worse in terms of that delay, so we set it up to 150 for the C100, and that seems to be the number that works really well for that camera. So, you know, if we added things like switchers or other things into our network here, we would make an adjustment.
I guess every component that you add to your video path is going to add a little bit of delay, right?
It is. And we had one switcher here. We have a pretty old, actually, Geffen switcher that was a 16-port DVI matrix switcher.
That thing's a beast.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I expected to see 1 or 2 frames of delay through that. We added that switcher into our path just to see what effect that would have, and it was very little. So that was pretty surprising.
Yeah.
But we do have some other switchers. We had a monoprice switcher that we use in one of our verification labs. We measured that, and it is about a frame of delay. So you're adding another 17, 18 milliseconds of delay coming through that switcher. So certainly as you start to add these things up, you've got some coming out of your camera, you go through a switcher, they start to add up. So you want to make sure when you modify those signal chains, if you're adding elements into your environment, in your studio or your live setup, you want to measure again and just double check and then re-enter that.
And if you can isolate each component and measure them separately, then you can get a reading for each component. And if you do change your setup, if you do change your signal chain, it's very easy to get a ballpark figure of what you're going to need.
Yeah, you've got a starting point, right, where you say, I think that one's about a frame and that's about 3 frames. Then you can say, okay, I'll put 100 milliseconds in, I should be good. But it's always great to measure, and using a laptop or an iPad with a little, virtual clapper is kind of the easiest way to make sure that your calculations are right and your ballpark number is good enough.
So I think we've pretty much covered it. We must be explaining things really well because there's no questions in chat, but we do have a bunch of people watching. So just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope this topic was useful to you. Once again, check back here on this video and on the Epiphan YouTube channel because we are going to be uploading an AV test pattern that hopefully will be useful to you guys. Once again, make sure to check in on the forum and say hello there. Lots of great information on the forum. And come visit us at NAB first week of April. We're really looking forward to seeing everybody. What day does it start? Is it the 7th?
It starts on the 6th, I believe. 6th through 9th, April 6th through 9. So first thing Monday morning, we'll be there.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Well, looking forward to seeing all of you there as well. And until next week, we will sign off for now. So this has been Live at Epiphan, and thanks so much for joining us.
Take care.
See you guys.